I know this is hard, Mom, but it's the right choice.
I don't know what to believe. Don't sign anything, Mom, please.
I'm sorry, Mom, but you can no longer handle your finances.
You really think I'm incapable? After everything?
Mom, we're just trying to help. The decision has been made. I need you both to leave now.
You're kidding me, right? Mother, come on.
My mother can't handle her money anymore. My son Ethan said it across the polished conference table as if I weren't sitting 3 feet away. Claire slid a folder toward the banker. We're only trying to protect her. Protect me. I was 68 years old, had managed payroll for more than 3 decades, and suddenly my own children were discussing my finances as though I were a confused old woman who needed permission to spend $1. Ethan leaned toward the banker. Please explain why she needs to sign. Richard Caldwell studied the papers, then looked at me. He closed the folder. I'm going to have to ask both of you to leave. Ethan's face went pale. And that was when I realized the meeting they had arranged to take control of my money was about to become something else entirely. If you've ever felt that love cross the line into control, tell me what you would have done. Like and subscribe if you believe getting older should never mean losing your voice. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. 3 months before that meeting at the bank, I still believed my children were simply worried about me. Looking back, that may have been the hardest thing to forgive myself for not trusting them, but ignoring the moment their concern began to feel like inspection. I had lived in the same brick house in Columbus, Ohio for 37 years. Walter and I bought it when Ethan was still a toddler, and Claire wasn't even born. Back then, the kitchen had yellow countertops. The basement flooded every spring, and we celebrated paying the mortgage by eating grocery store cake at the dining room table. Walter died 4 years before everything happened. Cancer took him faster than either of us expected. For the first year after his death, I sometimes woke up and reached toward his side of the bed before remembering there was nobody there. Grief does strange things to a house. Every room remains exactly where it was, but somehow the distance between the rooms feels longer. I kept going. I had spent more than 30 years working as a payroll supervisor for a manufacturing company outside Columbus. At our busiest, I was responsible for making sure hundreds of employees were paid correctly and on time. I understood deductions, retirement contributions, taxes, benefits, budgets, and spreadsheets. Numbers never frightened me. Walter used to joke that I could smell a misplaced decimal from across the room. We weren't wealthy in the way people imagine wealth. We never owned a vacation home. Walter drove his Ford until the driver's seat cracked. I clipped coupons long after we could afford not to. But we saved, every paycheck, every year. Walter contributed to his retirement accounts, and I contributed to mine. We invested conservatively. We paid extra toward our mortgage whenever we could. When Walter received a raise, we didn't immediately increase our spending. Money should buy freedom before it buys things, he used to tell me. By the time we reached retirement age, the house was paid for, our debts were minimal, and our investments had grown quietly in the background. Ethan and Claire knew we were comfortable. They did not know exactly how comfortable. Walter and I had made that decision deliberately. We loved our children, but we wanted them to build their own lives without counting what they might someday inherit. After Walter died, I kept managing everything myself. The electricity got paid, the property taxes got paid, my insurance stayed current, my investments were reviewed. I even kept a household spreadsheet that probably would have made my old coworkers laugh. So when the roof started leaking one rainy Tuesday morning, I treated it like any other problem. I noticed a brown stain spreading across the ceiling in the upstairs hallway. 2 contractors came to inspect it, and both told me the same thing. The roof had reached the end of its life. The final estimate was a little over $18,000. I didn't enjoy spending that kind of money, but I had planned for home repairs. So I wrote the check. That should have been the end of it. A week later, Ethan stopped by. He was 43, then handsome like his father had been at that age, with the kind of polished confidence that came naturally to him. He worked in medical equipment sales and always seemed to be rushing between appointments. He walked into my kitchen carrying coffee. Peace offering, he said. For what I'm sure I've done something. I laughed. That was Ethan. He could charm you before you even knew there was a reason you might be angry. We sat at the kitchen table while workers moved equipment outside. He glanced toward the ceiling. How bad was it? The roof? Yeah. 18,000 and change. He nearly stopped with his coffee halfway to his mouth. 18,000. That's what roofs cost now, apparently. You financed it right, no. His expression changed. It was subtle. If I hadn't spent 43 years watching his face, I might not have noticed. You paid cash, I wrote a check. For $18,000, I smiled. You've repeated the number 3 times, Ethan. It isn't getting smaller. He didn't laugh. Instead, he leaned back. Mom, where did you get $18,000? That question bothered me. Not because it was complicated. Because of the way he asked it. From my account. What account? I looked at him. My account. He rubbed his jaw. I didn't realize you kept that much cash sitting around. I don't keep it sitting under the mattress. That's not what I mean. I know. He looked toward the window. How much do you actually have saved? There it was. I remember hearing a nail gun outside. Pop, pop, pop. For some reason, I can still hear that sound whenever I remember the conversation. Enough, I said. Enough for what? For me. Mom. I'm not trying to pry. You just asked me how much money I have, because I worry. I reached for my coffee. About what? You're living here alone now. I've been living here alone for 4 years, and you're getting older. I raised an eyebrow. So are you. That finally made him smile, but only for a moment. Things are different now, he said. Scams are everywhere. People target seniors. You hear about somebody losing their entire retirement because they clicked one email. I don't click strange emails. I know. I'm just saying. He paused. Do you still have Dad's retirement money? The question landed harder. Walter's money. Not my money. Not our money. Dad's money. Yes, I said carefully. Everything is being managed. By who? By me. His expression softened immediately. Mom, I'm not criticizing you. It sounds like you are. No. I just want to make sure you're not making expensive mistakes without realizing it. I stared at him. Expensive mistakes. I had spent decades managing payroll larger than anything Ethan had ever personally handled. Yet suddenly, an $18,000 roof had transformed me into someone who needed supervision. I could have confronted him. Instead, I told myself he was grieving in his own way. Maybe losing his father had made him afraid of losing me. Maybe this was what concern looked like when adult children realized their parents were aging. So I changed the subject. When Ethan left, he kissed my cheek and told me to call if I needed anything. I watched his car disappear down the street. Then I went upstairs. The workers had removed the damaged section of ceiling and afternoon light came through the uncovered window at the end of the hallway. I stood beneath that brown water stain and thought about Ethan's questions. How much do you actually have saved? Do you still have Dad's retirement money? By who? I told myself to stop being suspicious. This was my son. The boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. The teenager who once worked an entire summer to buy his first car because Walter refused to hand him the money. The man who had held my hand at his father's funeral. Children worry about their mothers. That was all this was. At least that was what I believed. 2 days later, Claire called me. We talked about her work, the weather, and a house she was trying to sell. Then almost casually, she said Ethan told me about the roof. I smiled to myself. Apparently my roof had become family news. He did $18,000, Mom. Yes. There was a pause, then she asked the question that made me put down the dish towel in my hand. Did you really pay the whole thing yourself? I stood alone in my kitchen staring at the telephone. 2 children, 2 conversations. And suddenly both of them wanted to know exactly where their mother was getting her money. That was the first moment I wondered whether Ethan's questions had really been about concern at all. After Claire's phone call, I expected the questions to stop. Instead, they multiplied. At first, the changes were small enough that I could explain them away. Ethan started dropping by every Saturday morning. For years, I had been lucky to see him twice a month. Suddenly, he appeared at my door carrying coffee bagels or some little excuse to come inside. Just checking on my favorite mother, he would say. I'm your only mother, which makes you my favorite by default. He could still make me laugh. That was part of what made everything so confusing. One Saturday, I was sorting mail at the kitchen table when Ethan picked up my electric bill. You still pay these yourself? I looked at him. Who else would pay them, manually? You should put everything on autopay. Some things are, some aren't. He turned the envelope over in his hand. Did you pay this one? Yes. What about gas paid? Property taxes? I lowered my glasses. Ethan, what are you conducting an audit? He laughed and put the envelope down. I'm trying to make your life easier. My life wasn't difficult until you started interrogating me. That should have ended it. It didn't. A few days later, he called and asked whether I used mobile banking. Yes. Which app? The same bank I've used for years. I could come over and make sure all the security settings are right. They're right. How do you know? Because I set them. There was a brief silence. Then he gave that little laugh people use when they want to make disagreements sound harmless. Okay, Mom. I'm just trying to help. That sentence became his shield. I'm just trying to help. Whenever I questioned him, he used it. Then Claire started doing the same thing. One afternoon, she called while I was preparing dinner. Mom, have you heard about those scams where someone calls pretending to be your grandchild? Yes. And you know never to send money, Claire. I spent 32 years checking payroll discrepancies. I think I can survive a telephone call. I'm serious. So am I. She sighed. We worry about you. There was that word again. We. Not I. We worry. Ethan and Claire had started speaking as a unit. I noticed it, but I didn't yet understand what it meant. The first real argument happened over $500. My church was raising money to repair part of its community kitchen. That kitchen served meals twice a week to families who needed them. Walter and I had volunteered there many times. I donated $500. Claire somehow found out. How much did you give? She asked. 500. Mom. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear. What? $500 is a lot of money. It is. Then why would you just give it away? Because I wanted to. But you have to think about your future. I do think about my future. You could live another 20 years. I certainly hope so. You don't know what medical expenses you'll have. Claire, I appreciate your concern, but my charitable donations are not something I need permission to make. She became quiet. Then she said something that stayed with me. Nobody said permission. No, I replied. But that's how you're making it sound. We ended the call politely. Still, I felt guilty afterward. That was the strange part. My daughter questioned what I did with my own money, and somehow I was the one who felt guilty. A week later, my refrigerator began making a grinding sound. The repairman told me the compressor was failing. The appliance was nearly 14 years old, so instead of putting more money into it, I bought a new one. Nothing extravagant. Just a good refrigerator with enough freezer space and an ice maker that hopefully wouldn't break every 6 months. Ethan saw it the following weekend. You bought a new refrigerator, the old one was dying. How much I was putting groceries away. I stopped. Why, I'm asking, I can hear that. He opened the refrigerator door and examined the inside. You could have repaired the old one. The repairman recommended replacing it. Did you get another opinion? No. Did you compare prices? Yes. Did you use a credit card? I closed the refrigerator door harder than necessary. Ethan, why are you asking me all this? He looked genuinely surprised. Because I care. No. Caring is asking whether I like the refrigerator. You're asking how I paid for it. His face tightened. Mom, you get defensive every time we talk about money. Because lately money is all you want to talk about. That's not true. It feels true. He leaned against the counter. Look, things aren't like they were when you worked. Everything is digital now. Banking is different. Fraud is different. Investments are different. I know that. Do you? The kitchen went quiet. I stared at him. What is that supposed to mean? He hesitated, but only for a second. Mom, you don't understand money the way things work now. I felt something inside me go still. There are insults that hurt because they're cruel. Then there are insults that hurt because they come from someone who should know better. Ethan knew what I had done for a living. When he was 16 and wanted expensive basketball shoes, I taught him how to make a budget. When he bought his first car, I sat beside him and explained interest rates. When he got his first full-time job, I was the one who told him not to leave his employer retirement match on the table. And now my son was standing in my kitchen telling me I didn't understand money. I think you should go, I said. His expression changed. Mom, come on, I mean it. I wasn't insulting you, you were. That's not how I meant it. It doesn't change how you said it. He grabbed his jacket. At the doorway, he turned around. We're only worried about you. Then he left. That evening, I called Barbara Mitchell. Barbara and I had known each other for 26 years. She had worked as a nurse before retiring, and she possessed a talent I sometimes envied. She could recognize nonsense before it finished introducing itself. We met the next morning at a small diner we had been going to for years. I told her everything: the roof, the questions, Claire's reaction to the church donation, the refrigerator, Ethan wanting to know about my banking app. Barbara listened without interrupting. When I finished, she stirred her coffee slowly. What do you think I asked? I think you're asking because you already know something feels wrong. They're my children. I know. They worry because I'm alone. Maybe. That answer irritated me. Barbara. She put down her spoon. Thelma concern asks what you need. Control tells you what you're allowed to do. I didn't respond. She continued. If Ethan came over and said, Mom, do you need help paying bills? That's concern. If he starts checking whether you've paid them without being asked, that's different. He hasn't done anything terrible. I didn't say he had. Claire hasn't either. I didn't say she had. I looked out the window. For a moment, I wished Barbara would tell me I was imagining everything. Instead, she reached across the table and touched my hand. I'm not telling you to distrust your children. I'm telling you not to surrender your judgment just because they're your children. That night, I wrote her sentence on a yellow sticky note. Concern asks what you need. Control tells you what you're allowed to do. I placed it inside the drawer of my desk. 2 weeks later, something happened that made those words feel less like advice and more like a warning. On the first Thursday of every month, I received a statement from one of the investment companies Walter and I had used for years. It was predictable enough that I rarely thought about it. But that Thursday, the statement didn't come. I assumed the mail was late. Friday passed, then Monday. Still nothing. I told myself it was meaningless. Then the following month came. Again, no statement. That was when I picked up the phone. I had no idea yet that someone had changed where my financial mail was being sent, and I certainly didn't know whose address was now attached to it. The woman at the investment company sounded cheerful when she answered the phone. Good morning. How can I help you today? I had called expecting a simple explanation. Maybe statements had been delayed. Maybe the company had switched to electronic delivery. Maybe something had been lost in the mail. My monthly statement hasn't arrived for 2 months, I said. I'd like to make sure everything is all right. Of course. She asked several security questions. I answered each one. Then I heard typing. A few seconds passed. Mrs. Harrington, your statements have been mailed as scheduled. I frowned. They haven't arrived. Let me confirm the mailing address. She read the street number. It wasn't mine. At first I thought I had misheard her. Would you repeat that? She did. I knew the address immediately. Ethan's house. I gripped the telephone tighter. That isn't my address. There was a pause. I'm sorry. That is my son's address. I live on Briarwood Drive. I've lived here for 37 years. More typing. I see the previous address here. When was it changed? She gave me the date. I looked at the calendar hanging beside my refrigerator. 6 weeks earlier. My stomach tightened. Who requested the change? The representative became more careful. I can see that a request was processed, but I can't speculate about who initiated it based solely on what I'm seeing. I didn't request it. I understand. No, I need you to understand this clearly. I did not authorize my financial statements to be sent anywhere else. Her tone changed immediately. She transferred me to another department. I spent nearly 40 minutes verifying my identity, restoring my address, reviewing contact information, and asking for additional security measures. Before hanging up, I requested copies of the missing statements. Then I sat at my kitchen table. Barbara's sentence came back to me. Concern asks what you need. Control tells you what you're allowed to do. But this was something else. This wasn't Ethan asking whether I had paid my electric bill. Someone had changed where my financial information was being delivered, and it had gone to my son's house. I called Ethan. He answered on the fourth ring. Hey, Mom, did you change the mailing address on my investment account? Silence. Not confusion. Not surprise. Silence. That told me more than any answer could have. Ethan, I was going to tell you. My heart sank. So you did. Mom, don't make this into something it isn't. What is it I was helping? I closed my eyes. There was that word again. Helping. You redirected my financial statements to your house. I didn't redirect your money. I didn't say you did. Then why are you acting like I stole something? Because you changed information on an account that belongs to me without asking. He exhaled loudly. Those statements contain account numbers and personal information. You leave mail sitting around. In my own house. Exactly. You're alone there. I almost laughed. What does living alone have to do with my mailbox? People steal mail, Mom. So you protected me by having my mail sent to you. Yes, without telling me. I knew you'd overreact. That sentence struck me harder than I expected. Not because he had changed the address. Because he had already decided that my objection would be unreasonable. You knew I would say no, I said. That isn't what I said. It is exactly what you said. Mom, did you open the statements? Another pause. Ethan. I looked at one. My fingers went cold. You opened my financial mail. I wanted to make sure everything looked normal. You had no right. I'm your son. And he went quiet. I could hear traffic through his phone. Finally, he said, Why are you acting like I'm some stranger because my son should know better? His voice hardened. You're making a huge issue out of nothing. No. I'm asking why you secretly redirected my financial statements. I told you why, and I'm telling you to never do it again. You don't have to talk to me like that. I shouldn't have to talk to you about this at all. He hung up first. I sat there holding the phone. 10 minutes later, Claire called. That was when I knew Ethan had contacted her immediately. Mom, what happened? You already know. Ethan called me. Of course he did. He's upset. So am I. He was trying to protect you. Did he tell you? He opened my investment statement. Claire hesitated. He mentioned it. And you're comfortable with that? No. But I understand why he worries. I stood and walked toward the kitchen window. Claire, your brother changed the mailing address on my account. He shouldn't have done it without telling you. Good. Then we agree. But you're making it sound sinister. I haven't called it anything. I'm telling you what happened. He worries because you've been forgetting things. I turned from the window. What things you know? Little things. No, Claire. Tell me. Another pause. You forgot lunch with me last month. I remembered. We had moved lunch from Thursday to Tuesday because Claire had a showing. I had written the original date on my calendar and forgotten the change. One missed lunch. That makes me incapable of receiving my own mail. I didn't say incapable. What are you saying? We've noticed things. We, she sighed. Ethan and I. There it was again. We. What else have you noticed? You ask the same questions sometimes. So do you. Mom. No. If you're going to make claims about me, be specific. She became quiet. Then she said it. We're worried there might be some cognitive decline. I sat down. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Cognitive decline. 2 words that can turn an older woman from a mother into a problem. Have you discussed this with anyone else? No. I didn't believe her. Claire. I'm 68. I know. I still drive. I manage my house. I pay every bill. I volunteer. I keep my medical appointments. I manage my investments. Nobody is saying you can't. Your brother just redirected my investment statements. Because he's worried. And now you're telling me my mind may be declining. We love you. That was the sentence that hurt most. because love was being used as an explanation for something that did not feel loving. I have to go, I said. Mom, please don't be angry. I'm not angry. That wasn't entirely true. I was angry. But underneath the anger was something colder. Fear. Not fear that I was losing my mind. Fear that my children had begun telling themselves I was. After we hung up, I walked into my home office. Walter's old desk sat beneath the window. I opened the bottom drawer and took out a notebook. For years, I had used notebooks at work whenever something didn't reconcile. Dates, amounts, names, conversations, facts before conclusions. That habit had saved me countless times when an employee disputed a paycheck or a manager insisted he had submitted paperwork that never arrived. So I began writing. June 14, Ethan asked about roof payment and savings. June 16, Claire asked how I paid for roof. June 22, Ethan asked about online banking and bills. June 29, Claire questioned $500 church donation. July 6, Ethan questioned refrigerator purchase. Then I wrote the date. The investment company said my mailing address had been changed. Beside it, I wrote, Ethan admitted changing address. Ethan admitted opening one statement. Claire used phrase, cognitive decline. I stared at those words. Seeing them on paper changed something. Individually, each incident could be explained. Together, they formed a pattern. I opened my filing cabinet. Insurance documents, bank statements, property records, Walter's death certificate, investment information, estate documents. Everything was organized exactly where it had always been. Suddenly, that frightened me. Ethan had grown up in this house. He knew where I kept things. The next morning, I drove to an office supply store and bought a small fire-resistant locking document box. I moved my most important papers into it. Then I placed the box in a location neither child would think to look. I also changed several passwords. I hated every minute of it. There is something deeply painful about protecting yourself from people you once protected with your own body. I remembered Ethan at 6 years old asleep against my shoulder during a thunderstorm. Claire at 8 crying because she'd fallen off her bicycle. I had spent my life being the safe place they ran toward. Now I was hiding financial documents from them. That evening, Barbara came over. I told her what had happened. She didn't say I told you so. That was one reason I loved her. She simply listened. When I finished, she asked, "Do you think Ethan wants your money?" "I don't know." "Do you think Claire does?" "I don't know that either." Barbara nodded toward the notebook. "Then keep writing things down until you do know." I looked at her. I feel ridiculous. Why? Because they're my children. That doesn't make facts less factual. I swallowed. What if I'm overreacting? Then eventually you'll have a notebook full of harmless explanations and you'll be relieved. And if I'm not, Barbara's expression changed. Then you'll be glad you paid attention. After she left, I locked the front door and checked it twice. For the first time since Walter died, the house didn't feel empty. It felt exposed. 3 days later, Ethan texted me. Family dinner Sunday. Claire and I want to talk. Nothing dramatic. We just think we should all get on the same page. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, "What page?" His response came almost immediately. "Your future." I didn't know it yet, but by the end of that Sunday dinner, my children would place a legal document in front of me and ask me to sign away something far more important than money. Sunday dinner at Claire's house looked so normal that for the first hour I almost convinced myself I had been unfair to both of my children. Claire had made pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the same meal I used to cook when she and Ethan were young. She had even baked an apple pie. When I walked through the door, she hugged me longer than usual. "I'm glad you came, Mom. You invited me to dinner, not a hostage negotiation." She laughed. But Ethan didn't. I was standing near the kitchen island pouring iced tea. He gave me a quick smile and kissed my cheek. "No fighting tonight," he said. "I wasn't planning on any." Good. That word stayed with me. Good. As though my behavior had already been discussed. Still, I tried to enjoy myself. For most of dinner, nobody mentioned money. Claire talked about a difficult house she was trying to sell. Ethan complained about a new regional manager at work. I told them Barbara and I were thinking about taking a short trip to Nashville in the fall. Nashville, Claire asked. For 4 days. Why, I smiled. Because it's there. She laughed, but Ethan immediately asked, Have you booked anything? No. Don't book until you compare prices. I looked at him. He lowered his eyes to his plate. Just saying. There it was again. That little reminder that even a 4-day trip required their supervision. I let it go. After dinner, Claire brought out the pie. We ate it with vanilla ice cream, and for a few minutes I remembered birthdays and Sunday dinners from years earlier. Walter would have loved that pie. The thought came suddenly enough to hurt. He had always eaten the crust first and saved the soft apple filling for last. I wondered what he would have said if he had been sitting beside me. I wouldn't have to wonder for long. Claire cleared the dessert plates. Then Ethan said, Mom, before you go, there's something we need to discuss. My stomach tightened. Claire stopped beside the dining room cabinet. Do we have to do this tonight? Ethan looked at her. We agreed. Those 2 words confirmed what I had already suspected. This dinner had never been just dinner. Claire opened a drawer and removed a blue folder. She placed it in front of me. What is this? Just read it, Ethan said. I opened the folder. The first page contained language I recognized immediately, power of attorney. I looked up. No. Mom, you haven't even read it. I know what a power of attorney is. Claire sat beside me. It's just for emergencies. I turned another page. The document granted broad authority over banking investments, financial transactions, and property matters, if activated under its terms. My eyes moved slowly across the language. The strange thing was, I wasn't confused. I understood enough to know exactly why I didn't want to sign it. Who prepared this? Ethan answered. We had someone help us. Who? A lawyer. Your lawyer. A lawyer I know. I closed the folder. No. Ethan leaned back. Can you at least listen? I've listened for weeks. That's not fair. What isn't fair is bringing me here under the pretense of dinner and putting legal documents in front of me after dessert. Claire reached for my hand. I moved mine away. Her face fell. Mom, please. We're not trying to take anything from you. Then why do you need authority over my accounts, in case something happens? Something hasn't happened, but something could. Something could happen to you tomorrow, Claire. Should I have power over your bank account? She looked down. Ethan spoke more firmly. This is different. Because I'm 68. Because you're alone. I am widowed, Ethan. I am not helpless. Nobody said helpless. You don't have to say it. You've been treating me that way for weeks. His jaw tightened. I could see his patience thinning. We're trying to plan ahead. For my future, yes. My future seems to involve everyone making decisions except me. Claire's eyes filled with tears. That caught me off guard. Why don't you trust us? She asked. I felt the familiar pull of motherhood, the instinct to comfort. For nearly 40 years, Claire's tears had made me want to fix whatever hurt her, even when she was the one hurting me. This isn't about trust, I said softly. How can it not be? Because responsible planning does not require me to sign documents prepared by someone else's lawyer at your dining room table. We're your children. I know exactly who you are. Ethan pushed his chair back slightly. Mom, nobody wants your money. I never said you did. Then stop acting like we're trying to rob you. The word hung there. Rob. He had introduced it, not me. I watched him carefully. What exactly are you afraid I'm going to do with my money? He gave a frustrated laugh. You already spent $18,000 on a roof. My house needed a roof. You gave $500 to church. My money. You bought a refrigerator without even getting a second repair estimate. My refrigerator. You see, that's exactly the problem. I stared at him. What problem? Every time we raise a concern, you say, my money, my house, my decision. Because they are. Claire wiped her eyes. Mom, you could get scammed. I could. You could make a bad investment. I could. You could get sick. I could. Then why won't you let us protect you? I looked at my daughter. Looked at. Because protection that requires me to surrender control when I am perfectly capable of managing my life isn't protection. Ethan stood. His chair scraped the floor. Do you know how stubborn you sound? I stood too. No. I know how clear I sound. His voice rose. We can't just wait until you get scammed or give everything away. Silence. Even Claire looked at him. There it was. Not if. Until. As if my failure were inevitable. As if my money were already something they needed to preserve from me. I picked up my purse. I'm going home, Mom, Claire said. I appreciate dinner. Don't leave like this. How should I leave? Ethan rubbed both hands over his face. Nobody is attacking you. You changed the address on my investment account. I explained that. You opened my statement. To check it. You and your sister have discussed my supposed cognitive decline. Claire whispered. We were worried. And now you've put a power of attorney in front of me. Ethan pointed toward the folder. That's what responsible families do. No. Responsible families have conversations. They don't make decisions first and invite the person afterward. I walked toward the door. Claire followed me. Please take the papers home. I don't need them. Just read them. I turned. I already know my answer. Outside, the air was cool. I got into my car and sat there before starting the engine. My hands were trembling. I wasn't sure whether it was anger or grief, maybe both. As I drove home, Ethan's words replayed in my head. We can't just wait until you get scammed or give everything away. Then another detail surfaced. Something he had said while arguing about the documents. I couldn't remember the exact sentence at first. At a red light, it came back. Ethan had mentioned that my Hawthorne account needed someone watching it. Hawthorne Financial. I felt my foot press harder against the brake. Walter and I had opened that investment account years earlier. Claire didn't know the name of the company. As far as I knew, Ethan didn't either. I had never discussed it with him. The statements that had been redirected to Ethan's house came from a different investment company, so he couldn't have learned the name from the piece of mail he admitted opening. When I reached home, I went straight to my office. I unlocked my document box and found the Hawthorne statement. I stared at the company name printed across the top. Then I opened my notebook. Under Sunday's date, I wrote, Ethan knew the name Hawthorne Financial. I underlined it twice. For the first time, I stopped asking whether my children were being overprotective. I started asking a much more frightening question. How much did Ethan already know about my money, and how had he found out? Once I started asking how Ethan knew about Hawthorne Financial, I had to fight the urge to call him immediately. The mother in me wanted an explanation. The payroll supervisor in me wanted evidence. For once, I listened to the payroll supervisor. I did not accuse Ethan of anything. I did not call Claire. I simply watched. And once I started watching, I noticed things I had missed before. Ethan had always cared about appearances. Even as a teenager, he would save for months to buy one expensive jacket instead of 3 ordinary ones. As an adult, that instinct had only grown stronger. He drove a black luxury SUV that Walter used to call the spaceship. Then one Saturday, Ethan arrived in a gray sedan. I noticed immediately. Where's the spaceship? He looked confused. Your SUV. Oh. Getting serviced. Something wrong with it, transmission. I nodded. 2 weeks later, he came in the same sedan. Long repair, I said. What, your SUV? He barely looked at me. I sold it. That surprised me. You loved that car. I wanted something practical. Ethan had never voluntarily chosen practical in his life. But I said nothing. The next clue came accidentally. I was at a pharmacy when I ran into a woman named Denise Porter. Her husband had worked with Walter years ago, and I knew she had attended Ethan's wedding. After a few minutes of conversation, she asked, How's Ethan doing after that business mess? My stomach tightened. What business mess? Her expression changed immediately. Oh. I waited. She glanced toward the pharmacy counter. I thought you knew. Knew what? She lowered her voice. My husband heard Ethan invested in some medical distribution venture with 2 other men. I don't know the details. Apparently it didn't go well. I kept my expression neutral. When was this? Earlier this year, I think. Did he lose money? Denise looked uncomfortable. I shouldn't have said anything. That means yes. She touched my arm. I'm sure Ethan has it handled. I smiled because that was easier than explaining that I was no longer sure Ethan had anything handled. That evening I opened my notebook. Ethan sold SUV. Business investment failed, possible financial problems. I stared at those words. Then I wrote another line beneath them. Timing. The questions about my money had begun shortly after the roof replacement. But perhaps the roof wasn't the cause. Perhaps it had simply revealed something Ethan hadn't known. That I had accessible money. The next Sunday, Claire came by alone. She brought muffins from a bakery near her office. I almost laughed when I saw the bag. My children had become very generous with baked goods whenever they wanted something from me. I come in peace, she said. I've heard that before. She smiled awkwardly. We sat on the back porch. For 20 minutes we talked about ordinary things. Then I asked, how much money did Ethan lose? Claire froze. She was holding her coffee with both hands. What, you heard me? I don't know what you're talking about. Then look me in the eye and say, Ethan isn't having financial trouble. She couldn't. That was answer enough. How bad is it, Mom, you need to talk to him? I've tried talking to Ethan. He talks about my money instead. Claire looked away. It's complicated. Debt usually is. Her eyes snapped back to mine. Who told you? Nobody who knew very much. She exhaled slowly. Ethan made an investment. In what? A medical supply distribution company. He knew someone through work who was putting a group together. And it failed. How much I don't know exactly. Claire, I really don't. That I believed. But it's serious. She stared into her coffee. Yes, how serious. He borrowed. From a bank some. Other financing too. Did he use his house? Her silence answered me again. I felt a heaviness settle in my chest. Ethan had spent years building that life. The house in the suburbs, the expensive car, the image of success. Is he going to lose his home? I don't know. Does he? He says he can fix it. There was something in her tone. What does that mean? He's trying to stabilize everything. I almost let the phrase pass. Then I remembered Barbara telling me to listen carefully. What does my money have to do with stabilizing Ethan's family? Claire went perfectly still. Not a blink, not a movement, nothing. I waited. Claire, you're making connections that aren't there. Am I? Yes. Then answer the question. Ethan isn't trying to steal from you. Again, a word I had not used. Steal. First Ethan had said rob. Now Claire said steal. Why were my children defending themselves against accusations I hadn't made? I didn't say he was. Well, that's what you're implying. No. I'm asking why Ethan suddenly became interested in my savings at the exact time he was having financial problems. Claire stood. This is why he worries about you. My stomach dropped. What does that mean, you take things and turn them into something else? No, Claire. I'm asking a simple question. You're becoming suspicious. Shouldn't I be suspicious after your brother redirected my financial mail? He was wrong to do that. And after both of you put a power of attorney in front of me. That was about planning. Then why won't you tell me whether Ethan needs my money? She picked up her purse. I shouldn't have come. Sit down. Mom, please. Something in my voice stopped her. She remained standing, but she didn't leave. I softened my tone. If your brother is in trouble, he can come to me and tell me. Claire's eyes became wet. He's embarrassed. I am his mother. That's why he's embarrassed. I've helped both of you before. I know. If Ethan needs help, asking is different from deciding he should control my accounts. Claire wiped beneath one eye. You don't understand the pressure he's under. Then help me understand. He could lose a lot. His house, maybe. What else? She shook her head. I've already said too much. That sentence chilled me. Too much, meaning there was more. Claire walked toward the door. Before she left, she turned around. Ethan loves you. I know. He isn't a bad person. I didn't say he was. He's just scared. After she left, I remained on the porch. I believed her. That was the complicated part. I did believe Ethan loved me. I also believed he was scared. But fear can make good people justify terrible things. That night, I pulled out the notebook again. I drew a line down the center of a blank page. On the left, I wrote, what I know. On the right, what I don't know. Under what I knew, Ethan's business investment failed. He borrowed money. His house may be at risk. He sold his SUV. He knows about Hawthorne Financial. He redirected another investment statement. He wants financial power of attorney. Under what I didn't know. How much does he owe? Who does he owe? How did he learn about Hawthorne? What does he plan to do if I refuse? I stared at the last question. Then I remembered something Claire had said. This is why he worries about you. Because I was suspicious. Because I asked questions. Because I wouldn't cooperate. Somehow, every time I resisted them, my resistance became another reason they believed I needed supervision. That frightened me more than Ethan's debt. The following afternoon, I went grocery shopping. Near the produce section, I saw my cousin Martha. We hadn't spoken in several weeks. After hugging me, she tilted her head. How are you feeling? Fine. Really? Yes. Why? She looked embarrassed. No reason. Martha. She touched my arm. Ethan mentioned you've been having some trouble remembering things. For a moment, the supermarket seemed to disappear around me. What exactly did he tell you? Nothing terrible. He just said you sometimes get confused, and the family is keeping an eye on you, keeping an eye on me. I felt something cold settle into place. This wasn't only happening inside my house anymore. Ethan was talking to other people, creating a version of me I didn't recognize. I smiled at Martha. I'm doing perfectly well. I thought you were. When I got home, I opened my notebook. Under what I know, I added one more line. Ethan is telling relatives I am confused. I stared at it until the ink dried. Then I understood something that made the failed business, the missing statements, and the power of attorney feel even more dangerous. If Ethan couldn't persuade me to give him control willingly, he might be preparing to convince everyone else that I shouldn't have control at all. After Martha told me Ethan had been discussing my memory with relatives, I began noticing something I had missed before. People were treating me differently, not dramatically. That would have been easier. It was subtle. At church the following Sunday, a woman I had known for 15 years touched my arm and asked, "Did you drive yourself today?" Thelma? Yes. Oh. She smiled too brightly. Well, good for you. Good for me. I had driven to that church hundreds of times. Later, my cousin Martha called and reminded me twice about a family birthday dinner that wasn't happening for another week. Then an old family friend asked Claire while I was standing right beside them whether I was doing okay on my own. I answered before Claire could. I'm standing right here, Nancy. The poor woman turned red. That evening I opened my notebook. I was no longer documenting only financial questions. I started documenting the stories being told about me. Ethan says I forget appointments. Ethan says family is keeping an eye on me. Others now asking whether I drive safely. The strange thing was that Ethan's stories weren't entirely invented. That was what made them effective. I had forgotten lunch with Claire after she changed the date. I had once paid my water bill twice because I mailed a check and forgot I had already scheduled the payment online. When I noticed, I laughed and left the credit on the account. I had misplaced my reading glasses and found them in the laundry room. But if forgetting where you left your glasses meant you were incapable of managing money, half the country needed a guardian. Ethan took ordinary moments and arranged them into evidence. Then Claire called. Mom, can I ask you something without you getting upset? That's usually how people begin conversations that upset me. She sighed. Would you consider seeing your doctor? For what, just a cognitive screening? I closed my eyes. So we've reached that point. It would make everyone feel better. Everyone, me, Ethan, you. Don't include me in a vote I didn't cast. Mom, please. I could hear the strain in her voice. For a moment I wanted to refuse simply because I was angry. Then I reconsidered. If there was something wrong with me, I wanted to know. And if there wasn't, I wanted that documented too. All right, I said. Claire sounded surprised. Really? Yes. I can make the appointment. No. Mom, I said I'll do it. I'll make my own appointment. The next morning I called my physician's office. I had seen Dr. Patel for years. I explained that my children had raised concerns about my memory and that I wanted an evaluation. A week later, I sat in an examination room answering questions I never imagined would carry so much emotional weight. What year is it? Where are we? Remember these words. Follow these instructions. Draw this. Count backward. Recall the words. Dr. Patel also asked about my daily life. Did I manage my own medications? Yes. Did I drive? Yes. Had I gotten lost? No. Did I pay my bills? Yes. Was I having trouble cooking, shopping, or keeping appointments? No. I told him about the forgotten lunch and the duplicate water payment. He smiled gently. Thelma forgetting an appointment occasionally is not unusual. What about paying a bill twice? I've done that. I laughed for the first time all morning. He reviewed everything with me. Nothing in the screening suggested significant cognitive impairment. He did not promise that I would never develop problems. No honest doctor could. But at that moment, there was no clinical reason to conclude that I could not manage my own affairs. I asked for documentation of the visit. Dr. Patel looked at me more carefully. Is there a reason you need it? I hesitated. My children are concerned about my finances. Concerned how they want more control. He didn't ask for family gossip. He simply said, keep your records. So I did. When I got home, I placed the documentation in my locked box. Then I called Claire. I had the screening. Her voice brightened. You did? Yes. What did he say? That there's no indication of significant cognitive impairment. Silence. I had expected relief. Instead, I heard hesitation. That's good. It is. Did he do a full evaluation? I felt my shoulders tense. You asked me to get checked. I got checked. I know. I'm glad. You don't sound glad. I just mean one screening doesn't necessarily catch everything. There it was. The goalpost moving. What would satisfy you, Claire? Don't do this. No. Tell me. If a doctor saying I'm functioning normally isn't enough, what is enough, I don't know. Ask Ethan. She went quiet. That evening, Ethan called. Claire had obviously told him. Heard you saw the doctor. I did. Everything okay? Yes. That's good. Again, the same flat response. I waited. Then he said, you know those screenings aren't perfect. I nearly laughed. You two rehearsed that what Claire said almost exactly the same thing. We're being realistic. You wanted evidence that I was fine. Now you have it. We wanted you checked. I was. Mom, nobody is accusing you of anything. Yes, Ethan. You are. His voice hardened. Here we go. No. You listened to me this time. You told Martha I get confused. I said you've been forgetful. You've discussed my mental condition with family members without my permission. Because we're worried. You redirected my financial statements. That again. Yes, that again. He exhaled. You're becoming paranoid about everything we do. The word hit me immediately. Paranoid. Another label. Another way to turn my objection into evidence against me. If I don't object, you say I need help. If I do object, you say I'm paranoid. That's not what I'm doing. It is exactly what you're doing. Mom, you can't see yourself from the outside. And apparently you can. Sometimes family notices changes before the person does. I gripped the phone. What changes? You repeat things. You forget details. You get emotional. I get emotional when my son opens my financial mail. This is what I mean. I stopped speaking. Suddenly I understood the trap. There was no correct response. If I became angry, anger was evidence. If I became frightened, fear was evidence. If I defended myself, defensiveness was evidence. If I forgot anything, forgetfulness was evidence. And if I remembered everything, then they would say one good day proved nothing. Good night, Ethan. Mom, I hung up. The next morning, Barbara came over. I showed her the doctor's documentation. She read it and handed it back. How do you feel? Relieved? But they aren't. Barbara frowned. They should be. Ethan says the screening doesn't prove anything. Then why did they want you to take it? I looked at her. Exactly. Barbara sat across from me. Thelma, maybe it's time to stop trying to convince them. What do you mean you know you're functioning? Your doctor knows. If they refuse to accept evidence, more evidence won't solve the real problem. I looked toward Walter's photograph on the bookshelf. I don't understand how we got here. Barbara's voice softened. You're still thinking this is about whether you're capable. What else would it be about? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Money, control, Ethan's debt. That afternoon, I added the medical screening to my notebook. Then I created a separate folder containing copies of everything important: my doctor's documentation, notes about the redirected statements, dates of conversations, copies of correspondence. I felt ridiculous doing it, but I kept hearing Dr. Patel's words: keep your records. 2 days later, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. It was a number I recognized. The bank. Not an automated fraud alert. Not a generic customer service line. Richard Caldwell. I had known Richard professionally for years. He had helped Walter and me with several banking matters before Walter died. Thelma, he said after we exchanged greetings, I was hoping I could speak with you privately. Something in his voice made me sit down. Of course. I need to ask you a question. All right. Have you recently authorized anyone else to request access to or make changes involving your accounts? My hand tightened around the phone. No. There was a brief silence. Then Richard said something that made every warning in my notebook suddenly feel real. I think it would be best if you came into the bank. Should Ethan come? No. His answer was immediate. Please come alone. Please come alone. Richard Caldwell's words stayed with me long after the call ended. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the phone. For weeks I had been trying to convince myself there might be an innocent explanation for everything. The questions, the redirected statements, the power of attorney, the conversations about my memory. But banks don't usually call customers and quietly ask them to come in alone because everything is perfectly normal. My appointment with Richard was at 10 the next morning. I arrived 15 minutes early. The branch looked exactly as it always had. People waited in line. A young mother helped her little boy deposit coins. Someone argued quietly about an overdraft fee. Ordinary life. Yet I felt as though I were walking into a courtroom. Richard came out of his office. I was 57 with silver beginning to show at his temples and the calm manner of someone who had spent years discussing money with frightened people. Thelma. He shook my hand. Thank you for coming. His office door closed behind us. He didn't immediately tell me why I was there. Instead, he asked, before we discuss anything else, are you comfortable speaking with me privately? Yes. Has anyone asked you to report back to them about this conversation? No. Has anyone pressured you to make changes to your accounts? I hesitated. My children want me to sign a power of attorney. His expression remained neutral. Have you signed it? No. Do you want to know? He nodded. That's important. My heart was beating faster. Richard, what happened? He folded his hands. I need to be careful about how I answer that. What I can tell you is that there have been inquiries involving access and account information that caused us to want direct confirmation from you. Inquiries from Ethan. He didn't answer the question directly. I don't want to characterize anyone's intentions. My responsibility is to establish what you want. That distinction mattered. Richard wasn't asking me to accuse my son. He was asking me to speak for myself. So tell me, he said, do you currently want either Ethan or Claire to have authority to transact on your accounts? No. Do you want either of them added as an owner or authorized signer? No. Have you instructed anyone to change your contact information? No. Have you asked either child to manage your finances? No. Each answer made me feel steadier. Richard made notes. Then he looked up. Are these answers your own decisions? Yes. Has anyone coached you to give them no? I almost smiled at the absurdity of it. Then I remembered what Ethan had been telling people. Richard, my children think I'm having cognitive problems. He didn't react. Do you believe you are? No. Have you discussed that with a medical professional? I opened my purse. I brought something. I handed him the documentation from Dr. Patel. He read it carefully and returned it. Keep the original. I intend to. Good. I told him everything. Not every childhood memory or argument, just the facts, the roof, the sudden questions about savings, the investment statement redirected to Ethan's address. Ethan admitting he opened one. the power of attorney at Claire's house, the cognitive decline comments, the screening, Ethan's financial trouble. Richard listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked, "Do you have copies of your notes at home? Keep them somewhere secure." "I already moved my important documents." "Good." That word sounded very different coming from him. Not approval of obedience, recognition of caution. "What should I do?" I asked. "First, don't sign anything you don't fully understand or genuinely want to sign." "I won't." "Second, if you're considering any power of attorney or estate changes, speak with an attorney who represents you alone. Not Ethan's lawyer, not Claire's lawyer, yours." I nodded. "And the bank. We can document your instructions and apply appropriate safeguards consistent with our procedures. But I want you to understand something, Thelma." He leaned forward. "This isn't about choosing between you and your children. I understand. It's about establishing whose money this is and who has authority over it." "Mine." "Correct. One word. Mine." I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear someone say that without adding a warning about my age. Richard reviewed contact details with me, my address, phone number, email. He confirmed which instructions I wanted documented. Then I asked, "Are my children trying to take money from my accounts? I don't have evidence before me that allows me to tell you that." It wasn't the dramatic answer I wanted, but it was the responsible one. "Then why did you call?" He paused. "Because when there are unusual inquiries or concerns involving a customer's access or decision-making, direct communication with the customer matters. Something happened. Something prompted us to verify your wishes." "What, Thelma? There are details I may not be able to discuss the way you're asking me to. What matters today is that I have heard directly from you." I studied his face. Richard knew more than he was telling me. I was certain of it. But for the first time, that didn't frighten me. It made me understand that I needed to stop reacting and start preparing. Before I left, Richard handed me the name of a local attorney. "You don't have to use this person," he said, "but get independent legal advice." I did. 3 days later, I sat across from an attorney and explained the situation again. She asked questions that were even more uncomfortable than Richard's. Did Ethan have keys to my house? Yes. Did Claire? Yes. Did either know passwords? Not anymore. Did they know where my legal documents were? Possibly. Had I signed anything recently? No. Had I made promises regarding inheritance? Nothing specific. Did anyone depend on me financially? No. By the end of the meeting, I was exhausted. But I was also clearer. I didn't need to declare war on my children. I needed boundaries, documentation, independent advice, and control over information. When I returned home, I made several changes. I reviewed my passwords again. I secured financial paperwork. I stopped discussing account balances with family. I wrote down every important interaction. And I made one decision that hurt more than all the others. I changed the locks. Ethan and Claire had received keys years earlier for emergencies. Neither had misused those keys as far as I knew. But I no longer wanted anyone entering my home without my knowledge. When the locksmith finished, I stood holding the new key. I thought about Walter. "What would you think of all this?" I whispered. His photograph, of course, gave no answer. I missed him terribly. Not because I needed a man to manage anything for me. I missed having one person who knew exactly who I was before anyone started questioning it. That evening, Ethan called. I almost didn't answer. "Hey, Mom." His voice was unusually warm. "Hello, how are you?" "Fine. Claire said you haven't been calling much." "I've been busy." "With what?" There it was. The question sounded innocent. I kept my answer simple. "My life." He laughed. "Okay." Then he asked, "Everything all right with the bank?" My hand tightened around the phone. I had never told him I had gone there. Why wouldn't it be? A pause. No reason. I waited. He changed the subject. After we hung up, I opened my notebook. I wrote Ethan asked if everything was all right with the bank. I had not told him about meeting Richard. I underlined it, twice. The next afternoon, Claire came to my house without calling first. She seemed nervous. She carried a leather tote and a thick folder. We talked in the living room for half an hour. She apologized again for the dinner and said she wanted things to feel normal between us. I wanted that too. God help me, I wanted it desperately. When she left, she hugged me. Love you, Mom. I love you too. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Claire. Mom, I think I left a folder at your house. I looked toward the chair where she had been sitting. A folder lay partly hidden beside it. I see it. Don't worry about it. I'll come back. Her voice changed. Too fast. Too sharp. Please don't open it. I stared at the folder. I wasn't planning to. Okay. Good. I'll be there in 15 minutes. She hung up. I walked over and picked it up. A loose page had slipped halfway out. I wasn't searching. I didn't need to. Across the top of the exposed page was my full name. Thelma Harrington. Below it were three words that made my stomach turn. Estimated financial assets. And underneath those words were numbers. My numbers. Not guesses someone could make from looking at my house. Account estimates. Property equity. Investment figures. I stood in my living room holding the folder my daughter had begged me not to open. Then my eyes fell on one handwritten note near the bottom of the exposed page. I read it once, then again. And suddenly I understood why Ethan had been so interested in whether everything was all right with the bank. The handwritten note beside the investment figure contained only 5 words, enough to clear E's exposure. I read it again, then a third time. E. There was only one E in our family whose finances had suddenly become everyone's concern. Ethan. For weeks I had been trying not to make accusations without proof. Now I was standing in my living room holding a folder that treated my savings like a solution to my son's debt. I should have put it down. The folder belonged to Claire. Opening it felt like crossing a boundary. Then I remembered my investment statements arriving at Ethan's house. I remembered him opening my mail. I remembered the power of attorney. I remembered relatives asking whether I could still drive. They had crossed into my private life long before that folder landed in my hands. I opened it. The first page was titled Estimated Financial Assets. My home appeared at the top. Beside it was an estimate of its market value followed by an approximate remaining mortgage balance. The number beside mortgage was 0. Of course it was. Walter and I had paid off the house years ago. Underneath was estimated equity. The figure was disturbingly accurate. Claire was a real estate agent. She could easily estimate the value of my home. That alone proved nothing. The next entries were different. Retirement accounts, investment accounts, cash reserves, insurance, Hawthorne Financial. My heart started pounding. Some amounts were wrong, others were close, far too close. Someone had been assembling a picture of my finances, not casually, systematically. I turned the page. There were notes about possible authority under a power of attorney, questions about account access. A handwritten line said, "Need complete list before next meeting." Next meeting. I sat down. The room felt suddenly cold. I wasn't looking at a concerned daughter's private notes. I was looking at a plan. Then I found another page. Ethan's name wasn't written in full, but there were references to E's obligations, house exposure, and short-term liquidity. I didn't understand every notation. I understood enough. My assets were listed on one side. His problems were listed on the other, like columns on a balance sheet. My entire career had been built around numbers, and numbers tell stories when you place them next to each other. The story in Claire's folder was terrifyingly simple. Ethan owed money. I had money. They wanted authority over mine. My hands began to shake. I thought of Walter. We had spent years saving, not because we worshipped money, because we understood what money represented when you got older. Choice, security, the ability to remain in your own home, the ability to pay for care without begging your children, the ability to say yes when you wanted to give and no when you didn't. Walter had once told me, "Thelma, the best thing we can leave the kids is love. The second best thing is not becoming financially dependent on them." We had laughed then. I wasn't laughing now. I took out my phone. For a moment I hesitated. Then I photographed the pages that contained information about me. The asset estimates, the handwritten notes, The references to Ethan's financial exposure. I didn't photograph anything unrelated. I didn't want Claire's private life. I wanted a record of what involved mine. Then I closed the folder and returned it to exactly where I had found it. 11 minutes later, Claire's car pulled into the driveway. She came through the front door after I opened it. Thank God. Her eyes went immediately to the folder. Here. I handed it to her. She took it quickly. You didn't open it, did you? I looked at my daughter. For nearly 40 years, I had known when Claire was nervous. As a child, she twisted the hem of her shirt. As an adult, she pressed her lips together. She was doing it now. No, I said. It was the first direct lie I could remember telling my daughter. I hated how easily it came. Claire relaxed. It's work stuff. Then you should be more careful with it. I know, she hugged me. For the first time in my life, I did not completely relax in my daughter's arms. After she left, I locked the door. Then I sat down and looked at the photographs. Enough to clear E's exposure. I enlarged the image. The handwriting was Claire's. I knew because I had received birthday cards from that hand for decades. I called Barbara. She arrived 40 minutes later. I showed her the photographs without explaining. She read silently. When she finished, she looked at me. Did Claire make this? It was in her folder. Barbara pointed at the asset list. How does she know these numbers? Some she could estimate. Some I don't know. And this. Her finger stopped beside the note about Ethan. I think E means Ethan. So do I. Saying it aloud made my chest ache. Barbara sat beside me. What are you going to do? I don't know. Yes, you do. I looked at her. You're going to keep doing what you've been doing. You're going to document. You're going to get advice. And you're not going to let them frighten you into signing anything. I covered my face. Where did I go wrong? Barbara's voice softened. Thelma. I raised them. So what kind of mother raises children who sit around calculating how much money she has? A mother who raised two adults who are responsible for their own choices. Tears filled my eyes. I keep remembering them little. That doesn't mean they still are. That was the cruelty of motherhood nobody warns you about. Your children grow older. Your memory of loving them doesn't. Somewhere inside me, Ethan was still 6 years old. Claire was still 8. But the people making decisions around me were 43 and 39. They were adults. And I had to respond to what they were doing now, not who they had once been. That night, I moved the photographs into the folder containing my medical documentation and notes. Then I wrote everything down. Date, time, where Claire had left the folder, what I had seen, the exact wording of the handwritten notes. I made no accusations in the notebook, only facts. The next morning, I called my attorney. I told her I had found documents estimating my assets and connecting them to Ethan's debts. She asked whether anyone had moved money from my accounts. Not that I can see. Has anyone signed anything on your behalf? Not that I know. Then continue monitoring your accounts and do not sign anything. What if they try something? Then we deal with what they actually do, not what we fear they might do. That advice steadied me. Facts before conclusions. I had lived by that rule professionally. Now I would live by it personally. For the next several days, I said nothing. Ethan called twice. I answered politely. Claire sent me a photograph of flowers she was thinking of planting. I responded as if nothing had happened. It was one of the hardest things I had ever done. Then 4 days later, Claire called. Mom, can I come over? Of course, just me. Something in her voice was different. Tired, afraid. When she arrived, she looked as though she hadn't slept. She sat at the kitchen table but didn't remove her coat. Is everything okay? She nodded too quickly. I made coffee. When I sat across from her, I decided I couldn't pretend anymore. Claire. Yes, how much does Ethan owe? Her face changed. I told you I don't know exactly. I think you know enough. She stared at me. I reached into the drawer beside the table and removed one printed photograph. Not the entire folder. One page, the asset estimate. I placed it between us. Claire's face lost its color. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, You opened it. Yes. You lied to me. Yes. Her eyes filled. I leaned forward. And now you're going to stop lying to me. Claire looked down at the page. I pointed to the handwritten sentence. Enough to clear E's exposure. Tell me what that means. She covered her mouth. Claire. A tear rolled down her cheek. I had seen my daughter cry hundreds of times. This was different. This wasn't sadness. It was guilt. Tell me, I said again. She shook her head. You're going to hate me. No answer you give me will hurt more than continuing to wonder what my children are planning behind my back. She started crying. Then she said the sentence that finally stripped away every remaining excuse I had made for them. Ethan said we'd only need your money temporarily. I didn't move. Claire looked up at me. He said we'd put it back before you ever needed it. And suddenly the question was no longer whether my son wanted my money. The only question left was how far he had been willing to go to get it. Ethan said we'd only need your money temporarily. Claire's words seemed to hang between us. I looked at my daughter and waited. There was a part of me that still hoped she would correct herself. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe your money meant a loan Ethan planned to ask me for. But Claire had already told me the part that mattered most. He said we'd put it back before you ever needed it. I folded my hands on the table. How much? Claire wiped her cheeks. Mom, how much does Ethan owe? I don't know the exact total. Then tell me what you do know. She looked toward the window. The business failed worse than he told everyone. I said nothing. He invested his own savings first. Then he borrowed. Against his house. Yes. How much? I think the home equity borrowing was around 90,000. My stomach tightened. And the rest? There were other loans. Business credit. Personal guarantees. How much? Claire, I don't know. Maybe another 100,000. Maybe more. I leaned back. More than $200,000. Possibly much more. What happened to the business? The partners thought they had contracts lined up with several clinics. They expanded too fast. Inventory, warehouse costs, equipment. Then 2 contracts fell through, and Ethan kept putting money in. I thought they could turn it around. Of course he did. Walter used to say Ethan's greatest strength and greatest weakness were the same thing. He always believed he could win the next round. Is he being sued? Claire nodded. Possibly. One lender has threatened legal action, and his house, he could lose it. I closed my eyes. That explained the gray sedan, the nervousness, the sudden obsession with my finances, but it didn't excuse any of it. When did Ethan first ask you about my money? Claire stared at the table. A few months ago, before the roof. Yes. That surprised me. So the roof didn't start this? No. What did he was trying to figure out who in the family might be able to help? I almost laughed. Help! Claire flinched. He didn't start with the power of attorney. Then what did he start with? He wanted us to talk to you. About a loan. Yes. Why didn't he? Because he was embarrassed. And then you paid $18,000 for the roof. I understood. He realized I had liquid savings. Claire nodded. And then he started asking questions. I noticed. He thought Dad must have left you more than we realized. My throat tightened. Your father didn't leave me money as though I were some beneficiary outside his life. We built our finances together. I know. Does Ethan? Yes. Then why does everyone keep calling it Dad's money? Claire had no answer. I pointed to the printed page. How did you get these numbers? Some were estimates. Not all. She looked ashamed. Ethan saw information from statements. The statements he redirected, yes. And Hawthorne. Claire hesitated. He remembered seeing paperwork at your house. When I don't know. I didn't believe she knew the full answer. But I believed enough. What was the plan? There wasn't one plan. Claire, it changed. Then tell me how. She drew a shaky breath. At first, Ethan wanted you to lend him the money. Reasonable people ask. I know. But he didn't. He thought you'd say no. So he decided my answer didn't matter. Claire began crying again. I was desperate. Desperation explains behavior. It does not make it acceptable. She nodded. When you wouldn't tell us what you had, he said we needed to understand your finances first. So you made the asset list. Yes. You estimated my house. Yes. You gathered information about my accounts. Yes. And then you brought me a power of attorney. Claire covered her face. Yes. The word was barely audible. I felt something inside me break. Not dramatically. Quietly. Like a thread snapping. Why the cognitive decline stories? Claire lowered her hands. That wasn't supposed to become what it became. What was it supposed to become? Ethan said you were getting more forgetful. Was he genuinely worried about my health? At first, maybe. At first, she looked away. Then he started saying that if you weren't making sound financial decisions, somebody might eventually need to help. Somebody meaning him. Or both of us. And when my doctor found nothing concerning Claire's silence, answered me. You weren't relieved, I said. I was. No. A daughter who believes her mother may be losing her mind should be thrilled when the doctor says otherwise. I was glad. But it ruined the argument. She looked at me sharply. Mom, please. Isn't that what happened? We weren't trying to have you declared incompetent. Not yet. Her face collapsed. I don't know. That answer hurt more than a lie would have. I stood and walked to the sink. Outside, a cardinal landed on the fence. Walter loved cardinals. For one foolish second, I wished the bird could carry a message to him. Tell me what to do. Tell me how our children became people I have to protect myself from. Behind me, Claire whispered. I'm sorry. I turned. What are you sorry for? All of it. Be specific. She stared at me. I'm sorry I helped Ethan make the list. I waited. I'm sorry I went along with the power of attorney. I waited again. I'm sorry I talked about your memory like it was evidence. There. Finally. Truth. Why did you do it? Claire swallowed. Because Ethan kept saying it was temporary. What was temporary? The control. My skin went cold. He said if we could manage enough of the accounts, we could move money to cover the urgent debts, then replace it later. With what he believed the business could recover. And if it didn't, he never wanted to talk about that. I sat down again. So your brother wanted to gamble my retirement on the same business that had already consumed his savings. Claire nodded. And you agreed? Not at first. But eventually. Yes. Why? She looked at me with an expression I had not seen since she was a child, admitting she had broken something. Because he kept saying you had more than you'd ever spend. I felt physically sick. He said you own the house outright. You have retirement income, investments, social security. He said even if we borrowed some, you'd still be comfortable. My comfort wasn't his to calculate. I know that now. You should have known it then. I know. No, Claire. You knew then too. She began to cry harder. And that was when I understood something important. Claire hadn't been tricked into believing taking control of my money was right. She had known it was wrong. She had simply found enough reasons to tolerate it. I reached across the table and took the photograph. Did Ethan ever intend to tell me he was using the money? She shook her head. Not until he could replace it. I stared at her. So no. No. The kitchen fell silent. Finally, Claire whispered, Would you help him now? I almost couldn't believe the question. After everything you've just told me, he could lose his house. He made those decisions. He's your son. And I am his mother. Not his emergency fund. He's terrified. So was I when I discovered my financial mail had been redirected. Claire looked down. So was I when relatives started treating me like I couldn't remember my own address. So was I when my children handed me legal documents designed to give them control. I know. No, I don't think you do. I took her hand. Not because I had forgiven her, because she was still my daughter. I love Ethan. Claire looked up. I love you, she started crying again. But I will not hand either of you control of my money. What if he loses everything? Then I will love him while he faces the consequences. Her hand trembled in mine. I'm sorry, Mom. I believe you're sorry. Can you forgive me? Someday I hope so. That answer hurt her. It hurt me too. But forgiveness given before truth has consequences is sometimes just permission for the wound to happen again. Claire left an hour later. I watched from the window as she drove away. Then I opened my notebook. For the first time, I didn't have to write a question mark beside Ethan's motive. I wrote Ethan intended to use my assets to cover his debts. Claire admitted the power of attorney was part of gaining control. They intended to replace the money before I knew. I stared at the words. The uncertainty was gone. Strangely, that made me calmer. Until my phone rang. Ethan. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello? His voice was cold. Claire told me what she did. I said nothing. She had no right to dump all of that on you. She told me the truth. You don't understand what's happening. I understand enough. No, you don't. I understand you wanted access to my money without my consent. His breathing changed. Then he said something that told me the frightened son I remembered had given way to a desperate man. If you won't let us handle this voluntarily, Mom, then we're going to have to start talking about whether you should be handling it at all. If you won't let us handle this voluntarily, Mom, then we're going to have to start talking about whether you should be handling it at all. For several seconds, I said nothing. I wanted to make sure I had heard him correctly. Are you threatening me, Ethan? I'm trying to make you understand how serious this is. No. You just told me that if I don't give you control voluntarily, you'll question whether I'm capable of having control. That isn't what I said. It is almost exactly what you said. He exhaled sharply. You always twist everything. I looked at my notebook on the kitchen table. There was something almost comforting about seeing it there. Facts, dates, words. Things were harder to twist when they were written down. If you have something to say to me, I said, come say it to my face. I can be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in 14. Claire was with him. That surprised me. When I opened the door, Ethan walked past me before I invited him inside. Claire remained near the entrance. Mom. Her eyes were swollen. She looked ashamed. Ethan didn't. He went straight into the living room. I followed. Sit down, I said. I don't want to sit down. Then stand. He turned toward me. For the first time in months, there was no performance of concern. No coffee, no jokes, no gentle questions about whether I had paid my bills. Just anger. You had no right to interrogate Claire. I almost laughed. In my own kitchen, you cornered her. She came here voluntarily. She was upset. She was upset because she finally told me the truth. Claire whispered, Ethan, stop. He ignored her. You don't understand the position I'm in. Then explain it. I could lose my house. I know. His face changed. How much did she tell you enough? He looked at Claire. She lowered her eyes. Unbelievable. No, I said. What's unbelievable is that my children discussed using my money without asking me. We were going to ask you. When we tried. You handed me a power of attorney. That's not asking for a loan. You wouldn't even discuss your finances, because they're private. Private. His voice rose. We're family. Family doesn't mean ownership. Ethan paced across the room. You have no idea what it's like to be where I am. You're right. I don't. I spent 20 years building my career. I know. I put everything into that business. I know that now. And one bad year could wipe out everything. I looked at him. One bad decision can do that. His face hardened. So that's it. You want to teach me a lesson? No. Then help me. Ask. He stopped. What? Ask me. He stared. If you want help, ask me honestly. Tell me what happened. Tell me what you owe. Tell me what you've already done. Then let me decide. His jaw tightened. And if you say no, then my answer is no. He laughed bitterly. Exactly. That one word revealed everything. He didn't want help if help came with my right to refuse. He wanted certainty, control, access. You don't need all that money, he said. Claire closed her eyes. I felt something inside me harden. Excuse me, you heard me. Say it again. You're 68, your house is paid off. You have Social Security, retirement, income, investments. How much do you realistically need? I stared at the man I had given birth to. Who decides that I'm being practical? Who decides how much of my own money I'm allowed to need? Mom, don't make it sound ugly. I don't have to. Claire stepped forward. Ethan, this isn't helping. He turned on her. You created this mess. No, I said. He looked back at me. Your debt created this situation. Your choices created your fear. Your decision to investigate my finances created this mess. I was trying to save my family. By risking your mother's security, I would have paid it back. With what? When the business recovered. And if it didn't, it could. That wasn't my question. He said nothing. I continued. You wanted to gamble my retirement on the same business that already lost your savings. It's not gambling. Then why won't a bank give you the money? His face went red. I immediately knew I had touched the truth. That's none of your business. I almost smiled at the irony. Exactly. Claire covered her mouth. Even she understood. Ethan stared at me. Then he said quietly, after everything you've done for me, I never thought you'd abandon me when I needed you. The words hurt. They were designed to. I remembered helping him with college. Walter and I had contributed to the down payment on his first house. We had paid for part of his wedding. When his first child was born, I spent 3 weeks helping them. When he was sick, I worried. When he succeeded, I celebrated. When he failed, I encouraged him. But somewhere along the way, Ethan had confused a mother's generosity with permanent obligation. I am not abandoning you, feels like it. I will sit beside you while you meet with a financial counselor. I will help you understand options. I will bring groceries if you need them. If you lose your house, I will still love you. That's easy for you to say. But I will not hand you control of my accounts. He stared at me. No. And I will not let you use my money to erase consequences I didn't create. His expression changed. Cold now. If that's your position, then maybe we need to deal with the bigger issue. What bigger issue? Whether you're still capable of making sound financial decisions. Claire whispered, Ethan, no. He kept looking at me. You've been forgetful. My doctor disagrees with you. One screening. I manage my life. You make impulsive purchases. A roof and refrigerator are not impulsive. You give money away. $500 to church. You get suspicious. You redirected my mail. You get emotional. My son is threatening to challenge my competence in my own living room. His mouth opened. I raised my hand. No, you're finished. Mom. Both of you. Claire started crying. I pointed toward the door. Leave. Ethan didn't move. I'm your son. And this is my house. He laughed without humor. So now you're throwing me out? Yes. For the first time, he looked shocked. Claire picked up her purse. Come on, Ethan. He looked at her. You're just going to let her do this? Claire's voice trembled. She has the right to ask us to leave. He stared at his sister as though she had betrayed him. Then he turned back to me. If you force this, it isn't going to stay inside the family. A chill ran through me. Is that another threat? It's reality. He walked out. Claire paused at the doorway. I'm sorry. I looked at her. You had plenty of opportunities to say something tonight. I tried. You whispered. Her face crumpled. I hated hurting her. But silence had protected Ethan for too long. She left. I locked the door. Then I stood with my back against it. Only when I heard their car disappear did my knees weaken. I made it to the couch before I started crying. Not graceful tears. The kind that leave your chest aching. I wanted Walter. I wanted the version of my family that existed before money turned every act of love into leverage. For almost 20 minutes, I let myself fall apart. Then I washed my face. I opened the notebook. I wrote Ethan's words as accurately as I could remember them. If you won't let us handle this voluntarily, whether you're still capable, it isn't going to stay inside the family. Then I picked up my phone. First, I called my attorney. I told her Ethan had explicitly threatened to challenge my ability to manage my finances. She told me to preserve my records and avoid signing anything without independent review. When that call ended, I made another. Richard answered. Thelma, Richard. I think my son may try to convince people I'm not capable of managing my own money. There was a short silence. Are you safe? Yes. Has he threatened you physically? No. Has he asked you to sign anything else? Not tonight? Then don't make any decisions under pressure. If anything involving your accounts comes up, speak directly with us. I will. I slept badly. For the next several days, neither Ethan nor Claire contacted me. The silence was painful, but it also gave me time to think. Then on Thursday afternoon, Ethan called. His voice sounded completely different. Calm, almost ashamed. "Mom, I owe you an apology." I didn't answer immediately. "I lost my temper," he continued. "I said things I shouldn't have." "Yes, you did. I don't want lawyers involved. I don't want us fighting." Neither did I. "I think we should sit down with Richard," he said. "All three of us. Maybe four if Claire comes." "Why?" "To clear everything up. No accusations, no pressure. Just let the bank explain what makes sense." I looked at my notebook. 2 weeks earlier, I might have felt relieved. Now I wondered why Ethan suddenly wanted a banker involved. Still, I said yes, because this time I would walk into that room knowing something Ethan didn't. Richard had already heard my side, and before I agreed to that meeting, I made one private call to the bank. The private call I made to Richard lasted less than 5 minutes. I told him Ethan had apologized and wanted— "Do you want that meeting?" Richard asked. That question mattered. Not is Ethan requesting it? Not, would it help your children? Do you want it? Yes, I said. I think I do. Then we'll meet. I don't know what they're bringing. You don't need to. His calmness steadied me. "Thelma, if at any point you want the meeting stopped, tell me. I will." When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Prepared. The meeting was scheduled for Monday at 10. I arrived alone. Ethan and Claire were already waiting in the lobby. Ethan wore a navy suit and carried a leather portfolio. Claire held a thick blue folder against her chest. For one strange second, they looked like children waiting outside a principal's office. Then Ethan saw me. "Mom." "Good morning." He stood. "You look nice, thank you." Claire hugged me. Her embrace was hesitant. "I'm glad you came." I nodded. Ethan gestured toward the folder in her hands. "Nothing in there is final. We just brought some options." Options. I wondered whether the options included letting me remain in charge of my own life. Richard appeared a few minutes later. He shook everyone's hand and led us into a private conference room. The room was colder than I remembered. A polished table filled most of the space. Richard sat at one end. I chose the chair opposite him. Ethan sat on my right. Claire sat on my left. I noticed the arrangement immediately. My children had positioned themselves on either side of me. Whether intentional or not, it felt like containment. Richard opened a notepad. "What would everyone like to accomplish today?" Ethan answered immediately. "We need to establish a safer structure for Mom's finances." Richard looked at me. "Is that why you're here, Thelma?" Before I could answer, Ethan continued. "She doesn't really understand how vulnerable she is." Richard's eyes stayed on me. "Thelma, I came because Ethan asked for this meeting. And what do you want from it? I want everyone to be clear about what I do and do not authorize." Ethan shifted in his chair. "That's exactly why we're here." Richard turned to him. "Then let's allow your mother to explain." Silence. It was a small correction. But I felt it. For months, Ethan had been speaking about me. Richard was asking him to stop speaking over me. Claire placed the blue folder on the table. "We prepared some information." "What kind?" Richard asked. "A financial management proposal." I almost smiled. At Claire's dining room table, it had been a power of attorney. Now it was a financial management proposal. Ethan opened the folder. "We're not trying to take anything from her. That's been completely misunderstood." I said nothing. Richard did too. The silence made Ethan uncomfortable. He continued. "Our concern is that Mom has made several questionable financial decisions recently." "Such as?" Richard asked. "The roof." I looked at Richard. My roof needed replacing. "How much?" he asked. "Approximately $18,000. Was the work completed?" "Yes. Did you have sufficient funds?" "Yes." Richard made a note. Ethan frowned. "There were other things." "The refrigerator," Claire said quietly. I turned toward her. She immediately looked ashamed. Richard asked, "What happened with the refrigerator?" "It stopped working properly," I said. "A repairman recommended replacement." "And you purchased one?" "Yes." "Within your means?" "Yes." Ethan leaned forward. It's not about one refrigerator, it's a pattern. What pattern? Richard asked. She spends without consulting anyone. Richard looked at him. Is she required to consult someone? Ethan's mouth tightened. No, but that's the issue. I nearly left. Even spoken aloud, he couldn't hear himself. Claire opened the folder. There are concerns about memory, too. Richard looked at me. Would you like to address that I saw my doctor? I removed a copy of the documentation from my purse. I had a cognitive screening. There was no indication of significant impairment. Claire whispered, We know. Richard read the page. Ethan shook his head. One screening doesn't prove she never gets confused. No, I said. It proves you have no medical basis for saying I can't manage my affairs. That's not what I'm saying. You've said exactly that. Ethan's voice rose slightly. Mom, this is why we're here. You interpret every concern as an attack. Richard raised one hand. Let's keep this focused. Ethan nodded. Then he turned toward Richard. My mother can no longer handle her money responsibly. There it was, the sentence from the beginning. Except now, sitting in that room, I understood everything that had led to it. The failed business, the debt, the redirected statements, the asset list, the whispers about my memory, the power of attorney. Claire pushed the folder toward Richard. We're only trying to protect her. Protect me. I stared at my daughter's hand resting on the folder. Richard opened it. He read silently. Ethan leaned toward him. There are documents in there that would allow us to help with bill management and investment oversight. Obviously, anything would need to be done properly. Obviously, I said. Ethan ignored me. She has significant assets spread across different accounts. Richard looked up. How do you know that the room changed? Ethan hesitated. Family information. What does that mean? My father handled most of this before he died. I felt anger rise. That is not true. Ethan looked at me. Dad handled investments. We handled them together. You know what I mean? Yes. I know exactly what you're trying to imply. Richard looked at me. Did Walter manage your finances without your involvement? No. Did you manage household finances? Yes. Investments together while he was alive. Independently since he died. Bills, yes. Taxes with an accountant just as Walter and I did. Richard nodded. Ethan tapped the folder. This is becoming emotional. I looked at him. You keep using my emotional reaction to your behavior as evidence that there's something wrong with me. See? He turned toward Richard. This is exactly what I mean. Richard didn't respond. Ethan continued. She gets defensive, suspicious. She thinks everyone is trying to take something. Claire whispered Ethan. No. We need to be honest. He looked at Richard. My mother can't handle large financial decisions anymore. I felt strangely calm. Maybe because I had already heard the threat in my living room. This time there was a witness. Richard asked, What specifically are you asking the bank to do today? Ethan pushed the folder closer. We want you to explain to her why establishing financial authority for us makes sense. For both of you, yes. Over which accounts, whatever is necessary. Richard looked down at the documents. For almost a minute, nobody spoke. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. Claire shifted beside me. Ethan tapped one finger against the table. Finally, he said, Richard, please. Explain why she needs to sign. Richard stopped reading. He closed the folder. Then he looked at me. Not Ethan, not Claire. Me. Thelma, did you ask your children to prepare these documents? No. Do you want to sign them? No. Do you want either of your children to have financial authority over your accounts today? No. Ethan leaned forward. You're asking her the wrong way. Richard turned toward him. I'm asking the account holder. She doesn't understand the consequences. I understand them very well, I said. Ethan ignored me. You haven't seen what we've seen. Richard's expression changed slightly. What have you seen? The forgetfulness, the irrational suspicion, the spending. Claire stared at her hands. I wondered whether she finally heard how weak it sounded. Richard opened the folder one last time. He glanced at several pages. Then he closed it again. Very carefully. He placed both hands on the table. Mr. Harrington. Ms. Harrington. Ethan straightened. Yes. Richard's voice remained calm. I'm going to have to ask both of you to leave. Silence. Ethan blinked. What I need to speak with your mother privately. You can't be serious. I am. This meeting was my idea. That doesn't change whose accounts we're discussing. Ethan looked at me. Mom, I didn't rescue him. Richard stood. Please. Claire slowly picked up her purse. She looked at me, but I couldn't read her expression. Ethan remained seated. We're her children. I understand. We're trying to protect her. I've heard your concerns. Then why are you asking us to leave? Richard opened the conference room door. Because Mrs. Harrington is my client, and I need to speak with her without anyone else answering for her. Claire stood. Come on, Ethan. His face had gone pale. He looked at Richard, then at me. For the first time since all of this began, Ethan seemed to realize he wasn't controlling the room. He stood. As he passed my chair, he whispered, Don't make a mistake. I looked up at him. I've spent 3 months making sure I don't. Claire followed him out. Richard closed the door. The click of the latch sounded louder than it should have. Then he returned to the table and sat across from me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the question I had been waiting weeks to ask. Richard, what did the bank know before I ever walked into this room? He folded his hands. More importantly, Thelma let me tell you what your children apparently didn't know. More importantly, Thelma let me tell you what your children apparently didn't know. Richard pulled his chair closer to the table. For the first time that morning, I allowed myself to breathe deeply. Through the conference room wall, I could hear nothing from the lobby. Ethan and Claire were gone from the room. Nobody was interrupting me. Nobody was explaining me. Nobody was telling another person what I could or couldn't understand. Richard opened his notepad. Your children seem to believe that expressing concern about your judgment gives them some form of authority over your finances. It doesn't know. The answer was so simple that I almost laughed. Richard continued. Concern is not authority. Being someone's adult child is not authority. Disagreeing with how someone spends money is not authority. I thought of the roof, the refrigerator, my church donation, all those ordinary decisions that had somehow become evidence against me. What about cognitive decline? A legitimate incapacity issue is a serious matter. It isn't established because a family member says someone is forgetful. I nodded toward the folder Ethan had left on the table. They thought those papers would change things. Documents can grant authority if they're properly executed and if the person granting that authority knowingly chooses to do so. But you have repeatedly told me you don't want to sign. I don't, and that's the point. He turned a page in his notes. When we spoke privately before, you clearly stated that you had not authorized Ethan or Claire to manage your accounts. Yes. You also confirmed your contact information and your preferences. Yes. You answered questions about your banking history. I remember. You explained the purpose of your accounts and discussed recent transactions. I smiled faintly. Including my criminal refrigerator purchase. Richard actually laughed. I believe the refrigerator remains under investigation. That tiny moment of humor broke something inside me. I laughed too. Then unexpectedly my eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize. I reached for a tissue from the box on the table. I didn't realize how exhausting it was until they walked out. Richard waited. I've spent months proving things I never had to prove before. I understand. No, I mean little things. I started thinking about everything. If I forgot where I put my keys, I'd panic. If I couldn't remember someone's name immediately, I'd wonder whether Ethan was right. That kind of pressure can make anyone question themselves. I've been managing my life for 68 years. Richard nodded. And nothing we've observed in our interactions with you suggests that you don't understand the financial decisions you're making. The words settled over me. Not because Richard was certifying that I would always be capable. Nobody could promise that. But because he was judging me based on what I actually did, not on a story someone else told about me. I asked the question that had been bothering me since his first phone call. What caused the bank to contact me? Richard chose his words carefully. There were unusual inquiries related to your accounts and questions about what would be required for another person to obtain access or authority. Ethan, I can't characterize every contact or intention beyond what our records support. But there was enough activity involving your information that direct verification with you was appropriate. My stomach tightened. What kind of activity? Questions involving access authority and account information. Combined with the contact information issue you had already experienced elsewhere, I wanted your instructions clearly established here. So you thought someone might try to change something. I thought we needed to know what you wanted before anything went further. That was not as dramatic as discovering Ethan had attempted to empty an account. In some ways, it was worse. He had been testing doors, trying handles, finding out which ones might open. Did anyone move money? Not from the accounts we're discussing. I exhaled. Thank God. Richard nodded. That distinction matters. We shouldn't turn suspicious behavior into something we cannot prove. Facts before conclusions. I heard my own rule coming back to me. What we do have, he continued, is your direct instruction that neither child currently has authority to transact on these accounts. And if Ethan says I'm incompetent, that statement by itself does not give him authority. What if Claire agrees with him? Two opinions don't become a legal determination simply because there are two of them. I smiled despite myself. He won't like hearing that. I'm not here to make him like it. Richard turned the folder toward me. Do you recognize these documents? Yes, they're similar to what they brought to Claire's house. Did you request them? No. Did your attorney prepare them? No. Do you want me to keep copies of anything relevant to today's meeting according to our procedures? Yes. We went through what was appropriate to document. Then Richard asked me several ordinary questions about my accounts. At first I wondered why. Then I understood. He wasn't quizzing me like a child. He was confirming that the woman sitting in front of him knew her own financial life. I explained which account covered household expenses. I identified recurring deposits. I discussed a recent transfer I had made to cover the roofing bill. I explained why I kept a larger cash reserve after Walter died. Richard listened. When I finished, he closed his notepad. Thelma, your children may disagree with your decisions. They certainly do. They may think you should spend less. Yes. They may think you should give them more information. They definitely do. But disagreement is not incapacity. I looked down at my hands. For weeks, Ethan had blurred those two things until I had almost forgotten the difference. What should I do now? The same thing I told you before. Continue working with your own attorney. Keep your information secure. Review your estate documents if you believe circumstances have changed. And don't sign anything because someone pressures you. I've already changed my locks. That sounds like a personal decision. It was. And your account's passwords changed. Documents secured. He nodded. I hesitated. Richard, did I make this worse by refusing to help Ethan? That isn't a banking question. I know. He considered his answer. You are allowed to decide whether to give or lend someone money. That remains true even when the person asking is your child. I looked away. That was the part no spreadsheet could solve. Ethan was wrong. But he was still my son. If he lost his house, I would hurt. If his business collapsed completely, I would hurt. If he had to rebuild at 43, part of me would want to reach into my savings and erase every consequence. But doing that after everything he had done would teach him something dangerous. That enough pressure could turn my no into yes. Richard stood. Our meeting was over. When I walked into the lobby, Ethan and Claire were waiting. Ethan immediately stood. What did he say? I looked at him. That my accounts remain under my control. His jaw tightened. Claire looked relieved, or perhaps exhausted. Ethan glanced toward Richard's office. So that's it for today. He stared at me as if he expected more. I gave him nothing. I walked past them and left the bank alone. Outside, the morning sun felt warm against my face. I sat in my car but didn't start it immediately. Instead, I thought about something Walter and I had done nearly 12 years earlier. Something neither Ethan nor Claire knew the full details of. After Walter's mother died, we had spent months reorganizing our estate. We created a trust. We separated certain investments. We made plans for Ethan, for Claire, for the grandchildren. And because Walter and I never believed inheritance should shape our children's behavior, we never told them how much might eventually be there. Ethan thought he had discovered the size of my financial life by reading statements and estimating accounts. He hadn't. Not even close. That afternoon, I called my attorney. I want to review my estate plan. Has something changed? Yes. What I looked at the photograph of Walter on my desk. My children have shown me what could happen if they receive money without protection. There was a pause. Then my attorney said, "When would you like to come in as soon as possible?" Because Ethan had spent months trying to gain control over the money he knew existed. He had no idea that his actions were about to change what happened to the money he didn't know existed. My attorney spread the estate documents across her conference table and asked me a question I had been avoiding. What do you want your money to accomplish after you're gone? A few months earlier, my answer would have been simple. Take care of my family. Now I understood that wasn't specific enough. I want it to help them, I said. But I don't want it to destroy them. She nodded. That distinction matters. Walter and I had created our trust nearly 12 years earlier. We hadn't done it because we expected trouble. We did it because Walter's mother had died without a clear estate plan, and settling everything had taken almost 2 years. Afterward, Walter came home one evening carrying a folder. We're not doing that to our children, he said. So we met with an attorney. We organized accounts, beneficiary arrangements, property instructions, and investments that neither Ethan nor Claire ever needed to know much about. There was no secret fortune hidden under the floorboards. Just decades of disciplined saving, compounded investments, and careful planning. But the total was considerably larger than Ethan's homemade estimate. He knew about Hawthorne. He knew about one retirement account. He knew my house was paid off. He had seen enough to believe he understood my finances. He didn't. And that was the bitter irony. Before all of this, Walter and I had intended for both children to benefit substantially someday. I had even considered helping Ethan and Claire earlier if circumstances made sense. Not because they were entitled to it, because I loved them. Now I was sitting with my attorney asking how to protect that love from becoming an opportunity for someone else's desperation. I don't want to disinherit Ethan, I said. You don't have to. And I don't want the grandchildren punished. They don't have to be. I especially don't want Ethan's creditors reaching money meant for his children if there are lawful ways to protect it. My attorney nodded. Then we structure around your goals. That became the guiding principle. Not punishment, protection. We reviewed everything, the trust, beneficiary designations, the assets intended for my grandchildren, the portions Ethan and Claire might eventually receive. I changed the structure so that money intended for the next generation would remain protected rather than simply passing through their parents' hands. Ethan's potential inheritance would no longer arrive as one unrestricted amount. He could immediately pour into a failed business or lose to financial pressure. Claire's arrangements were also reviewed. Not because I believed she would do what Ethan had done, because I had learned something important. Good estate planning shouldn't depend entirely on everyone behaving perfectly forever. By the time I left the attorney's office, I felt no triumph, only sadness. I had protected what Walter and I built, but I wished I had never needed to. 2 weeks later, I asked Ethan and Claire to come to my house. Claire arrived first. Ethan came 10 minutes later. He looked tired. The polished salesman I had known seemed to have disappeared. His shirt was wrinkled. There were shadows beneath his eyes. We sat in the living room. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then I said, "I want to tell you something about your father and me." Ethan leaned back. "What?" 12 years ago, we created an estate plan. Claire looked at me. "I knew you had a will. It was more than a will." Ethan became still. I hated that I noticed. Even now, after everything, money changed his attention immediately. "Your father and I established a trust and reorganized several investments." "How much?" Ethan asked. Claire turned toward him. "Ethan, what?" She brought it up. I looked at my son. "That question is part of why we're here." His face tightened. I continued. "You believed the accounts you found represented everything I had. I didn't find. Please don't lie to me anymore. He stopped. You saw statements. You gathered information. Claire estimated assets. You believed you knew what existed. Neither spoke. You didn't. Ethan's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means your father and I planned more carefully than you realized. I told them enough. Not account numbers, not exact balances, but enough for them to understand that there were additional investments and a trust intended to benefit the family over time. Claire's eyes filled. Dad did that. We did that. She nodded quickly. I'm sorry. I appreciated the correction. Ethan stared at the floor. What happens to it now? I took a breath. The estate plan has been revised. His head lifted. So you're cutting me out? No. He looked surprised. Then what? I'm protecting the money. From me. From bad decisions. From creditors where legally appropriate. From pressure. From anyone who believes access to family money is the same thing as ownership. He stood. So I am being punished? No. This is because of what happened. Of course it's because of what happened. Decisions have consequences. He paced toward the fireplace. You know I'm already losing everything. I know. And now you're making sure I can't even count on my inheritance. That sentence confirmed I had made the right decision. Ethan, listen to yourself. He turned. What you just called money belonging to a living woman your inheritance. His face changed. I continued. I am alive, I know that. Do you? Because for months you've been calculating my assets as though they were resources waiting for you to need them. That isn't fair. Neither was telling relatives I was confused. He looked away. Neither was redirecting my statements. Neither was asking your sister to help inventory my assets. Neither was threatening to challenge my ability to manage money because I wouldn't give it to you. Claire was crying quietly. Ethan sat down again. I softened my voice. Your father and I wanted to help both of you. We never asked you to make a trust. No, you didn't. We didn't ask for an inheritance. You didn't have to. I looked at Claire. There are provisions intended for the grandchildren. She covered her mouth. They're still there. Yes. Even after what we did, they didn't do anything. She began crying harder. Thank you. I shook my head. Don't thank me for refusing to punish children for the mistakes of adults. Then I looked at Ethan. Your children will remain protected too. His eyes became wet. It was the first time I had seen genuine emotion break through his anger. But you will not control what was intended for them. He nodded slowly. And me, you have not been disinherited. He stared at me. But what you may eventually receive will have protections and conditions built around it. You won't receive unrestricted access simply because I'm gone. So you don't trust me. No. The word hurt both of us. But it was true. Ethan looked down. I suppose I earned that. For the first time since this began, he said something without defending himself. Claire reached for my hand. I don't expect you to trust me either. I want to someday, she cried. I squeezed her hand. But wanting trust back and earning it back are different things. She nodded. Ethan stood by the window. After a long silence, he said, How much was there? I almost smiled. Still, Ethan. Enough that if you had simply come to me honestly, we might have had a very different conversation. He closed his eyes. I didn't tell him more. He didn't need a number. The number wasn't the lesson. The lesson was that he had tried to seize control of what he could see, and by doing so had changed his relationship to far more than he knew existed. Not because I wanted revenge. Because he had shown me that unrestricted money could become another weapon against himself. Ethan left quietly. Claire stayed long enough to help me wash the coffee cups. At the door, she hugged me. This time I hugged her back. Not because everything was repaired, it wasn't, but because healing had to begin somewhere. After she left, I stood alone in the living room. Walter's photograph rested on the mantel. I didn't take anything away from them, I whispered. I needed to say it aloud. I protected it. And for the first time, I understood that protecting my family sometimes meant protecting them from the consequences of having too much access to me. The months that followed would cost Ethan his house. Claire her certainty about the kind of daughter she believed herself to be, and me the comforting illusion that motherhood guaranteed loyalty. But they would also give us something none of us expected: a chance to rebuild our family without my money holding it together. 4 months later, Ethan sold his house. I didn't hear it from him. Claire told me one Saturday morning while we were drinking coffee at my kitchen table. "He signed the papers yesterday," she said. I looked down at my cup. For weeks I had known it was probably coming. Still hearing the words hurt. Where is he going? He rented a 2-bedroom apartment outside Dublin. And the children, they'll have a room when they're with him. I nodded. There was a time when that information would have sent me straight to my checkbook. I would have calculated how much Ethan needed to keep the house, moved money from an investment account, and convinced myself I was protecting my son. But I understood something now. Saving Ethan from the sale would not erase what caused it. It would only transfer the cost of his choices from him to me. "Is he all right?" I asked. Claire hesitated. "No." I closed my eyes. But she added, "I think he might eventually be." That surprised me. "What makes you say that?" "He finally met with a financial counselor." I looked at her. "Really? He's restructuring what he can, settling what he can, and working through the rest with attorneys." "That sounds painful." "It is." I nodded. Sometimes painful and necessary are the same thing. Claire had been changing too. A month after our conversation about the trust, she told me she had started therapy. At first I didn't ask why. Then one afternoon she explained, "I need to understand why I let Ethan convince me that what we were doing was okay." I appreciated the way she said it. Not why Ethan made me do it. Why I let him convince me. She wasn't handing her responsibility back to her brother. Our relationship rebuilt slowly. Claire stopped asking about my accounts. She stopped checking whether I had paid bills. If I mentioned buying something, she didn't ask how much it cost. Once I told her Barbara and I had booked our Nashville trip. Claire smiled. "I hope you have fun." That was all. No questions about the hotel, no warning about scams, no request to review the reservation. It shouldn't have felt remarkable, but it did. Trust returns quietly, not through dramatic apologies, through ordinary moments when someone finally respects a boundary they once ignored. Ethan was different. For almost 3 months I barely heard from him. There were no angry calls, no surprise visits, no questions about my money. At first, the silence felt like punishment. Eventually, I realized it might have been shame. Tuesday afternoon, I found an envelope in my mailbox. My name was written across the front in Ethan's handwriting. Inside were 3 pages. I stood in the kitchen and read them twice. "Mom, I have started this letter about 10 times. Every version sounded like an excuse. I don't want to give you another excuse. I was scared. I was losing money, then the business, then my house, and I convinced myself that because you could help me, you should. That was wrong. I kept telling myself I would replace anything I used before you ever needed it. I used that promise to make something dishonest sound temporary. Then came the sentence that broke me. When you said no, I treated your no like evidence that something was wrong with you." I sat down. My hands trembled. He continued, "I talked about your memory because it made my plan easier to justify. I let other people question you because I needed them to believe I was protecting you. I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting myself from the consequences of what I had done." There was no request for money, no mention of inheritance, no demand for forgiveness. At the bottom he had written, "I hope someday you can trust me enough to let me be your son again." I cried. Not because the letter erased anything. It didn't. But for the first time, Ethan had apologized without trying to control the outcome. I called him that evening. "Hello." His voice sounded cautious. "I got your letter." Silence. "Okay. I'd like to see you." "Are you sure?" "Yes." We met 2 days later at the diner where Barbara and I often had breakfast. Ethan looked older. Not dramatically. Just tired. We sat across from each other. "I meant everything I wrote," he said. "I know. I don't expect you to forget." "I won't." He nodded. "I figured. I forgive you, Ethan." His eyes filled immediately. "But forgiveness doesn't mean we're going back to how things were. I understand. You don't get access to my accounts. I don't want it. You don't discuss my health with other people unless I ask you to. I won't. You don't tell Claire to persuade me when I say no. He almost smiled. I definitely won't. And if you're in trouble, I ask. Yes. And you can still say no. Yes. He looked down. I think that's the part I needed to learn. I reached across the table. He hesitated before taking my hand. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like he was reaching for something behind me. He was simply holding my hand. A few weeks later, I met Richard at the bank to finalize several updates. We reviewed everything carefully. When we finished, he looked at me. Are you sure these are the instructions you want? I smiled. Richard, after the last few months, I don't think I've ever been more sure of anything. He smiled back. Then we're done. Walking out of the bank felt very different from walking into it months earlier. The first time I had been surrounded by people explaining who I was. Now I knew I didn't need anyone else's definition. That Sunday, Claire and Ethan came to dinner. Nothing elaborate: roast chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes, apple pie. Ethan arrived carrying flowers. Claire brought ice cream. We sat at the same dining table where Walter and I had once helped them with homework. There were awkward moments. Healing isn't a movie scene. Nobody gives one perfect speech and repairs years of hurt before dessert. But we laughed. Claire told a story about a disastrous house showing. Ethan joked about learning to live without a garage. I told them about Nashville. Nobody asked what the trip cost. After dinner, Ethan carried the plates into the kitchen. Claire helped pack leftovers. At one point, I left my purse sitting on the dining room chair. Months earlier, I would have noticed immediately. I would have wondered who might look inside. That night, I forgot it was there for almost an hour, and nothing happened. When the children left, I stood at the front door watching their cars disappear. The house became quiet again, but it no longer felt exposed. It felt like mine, my home, my money, my decisions, my life. I walked into the living room and picked up Walter's photograph. You would have hated all of this, I whispered. Then I smiled. But I think you'd be proud of how it ended. I set the photograph back down. I was still Ethan's mother. I was still Claire's mother. I would always love them. But motherhood did not require me to surrender myself. Getting older had not erased my judgment. Being widowed had not made me helpless. And having money my children might someday inherit did not make that money theirs while I was still alive. I had spent months defending something more valuable than any account balance: my right to remain the author of my own life. And once my children finally understood that we could begin becoming a family again,